All right, we're going to talk a little bit about founder equity, how to divide up your company. So one of the first questions you need to think about when you're talking about equity is the structure of your company. Is it an LLC or is it Inc? Is it a limited liability corporation or a C corporation? Is really the two most popular options today. And generally this is going to be about taxes and about how many shareholders you have and about what kind of funding options you want. So, a limited liability corporation, or LLC, is best for companies that are designed to regularly turn out profits. They're going to create cash flow. Usually they'll have a smaller number of investors or shareholders, and that probably aren't looking for VC funding. And that's because of the tax treatment. A limited liability corporation passes on the tax treatment to its shareholders, and the result of that is less taxes than a C corporation. The company doesn't actually pay taxes, just the owners do according to their ownership. And so effectively, when you're paid, it's only taxed once. The company doesn't pay taxes, just the person that received the profits pays taxes. The government limits this to companies that only have a certain number of shareholders. And many VC firms and VC funds, just due to the rules of how they're structured and what they're trying to do for their limited partners, are not able to make investments in LLCs. So that's why an LLC is probably not as appropriate for a company that's planning on raising VC funding. Now, a C corporation is for companies that generally are going to be reinvesting those profits back into the company or going public. They allow you to have a much larger number of shareholders. In fact, basically unlimited, although at some point you need to go public. And is more appropriate for companies that are looking for VC funding. And that's what most VCs are going to insist upon, is that you, if you're not already a C Corp, that you become one. C Corps have the disadvantage of double taxation. So when the company makes money and is paid, it pays a corporate tax rate and files a tax return as a company. And then any money that's distributed to shareholders in the form of distributions or other types of profits is then taxed individually for those people that received it. And so in essence, that one amount of money made gets taxed twice. And that's why, one of the main reasons why it's not as desirable for many entrepreneurs. And in some cases, it can be better to start as an LLC and then become a C Corp later. Now, there's no right answer to these questions about how to break up the equity among a couple different co-founders. Every company is different. Every co-founder is different. Every situation is different. And so you're going to have to figure out what's right for you. And in fact, every answer is the wrong answer. If you were to look at any company and look back in time a few years out and say, did we perfectly allocate the equity to the different players based on their contributions and what they did and what their other opportunities were? I'm sure that in hindsight, you would never think that you got it exactly right. There'd always be different opinions. And in fact, each person would feel differently about it. Each person is going to feel like their own contribution is maybe bigger than other people might think. And if you added all those up, it just wouldn't add up. So there's no answer here that's right, and pretty much every answer is guaranteed to be wrong. So what you're trying to do is do the best job you can of setting things up in a smart way at the beginning that is as fair as it can be, and also is the most flexible and adaptable to things changing, because we know things are going to change. For me, I think one of the most important things especially for technology startup companies, is when you're thinking about equity, to optimize on winning big. Generally, this is a kind of home run kind of thing. Either you make a lot of money or you don't make any money, or very little money. And so in the cases where you don't make any money or very little money, then optimizing on what percentage you get often isn't going to make a difference. You're optimizing on a very small amount of money, and that's not the case that you're focused on. And in the cases where you win big, when there's a big exit, well then those little differences don't necessarily matter as much either. Everybody's happy because everybody's making a lot of money. And so that generally encourages you to be, I think, a little bit more generous and a little bit more trying to look at the big picture and focus on the good opportunities. Try to optimize for creating a situation that's going to incentivize everyone to win big and where you're going to do well when you win big. There's a saying, equity is like shit. Pile it all up in one place and it just smells bad. But spread it around and good things grow. And that's the philosophy that I've tried to incorporate into the companies that I work on. I want people to have equity, and I want advisors and other people around me that have an interest in seeing my company be successful. So a couple things that I think are pretty good absolutes about this. This needs to be in writing. It's very important that you discuss this clearly, you agree on what should happen, and then you write it down. And that's going to really reduce the chance of confusion later. If you just say it, I guarantee you later on down the road, people are going to remember things differently. And it's very important to have a lawyer write this up. This is the kind of thing where you have to be very specific, and a lawyer is going to help to write it in such a way that makes sure that that you are being very clear and aren't missing anything. And so that said, anything in writing is better than nothing in writing. So if you can't afford a lawyer, if you don't have a lawyer in front of you, it's still better to write down some notes and say, do we all agree on this? And try to be as clear as you can. And then have a lawyer write it up properly as soon as possible. And your shares need to be vesting. If we're talking about this, if you have co-founders, then everyone's stock should vest. And everyone's, yours too. And that's really what's best for the company and really what's fair to everyone. And it's something that a lot of founders have a little trouble with at first. They don't want to make their own shares vest. But you don't know what's going to happen. And even if everyone has the best intentions and everyone's planning on being a part of the company for a very long time, things work out differently. Sometimes the path of the company changes, and it turns out a critical skill or background that you might have been giving a lot of credit to isn't as important as it was before. Sometimes people's personal lives change. Someone gets sick or gets hurt and is no longer able to do what they were doing before. And other things can happen that are unexpected. And so in order to make sure that the company can survive, the appropriate thing to do is have everyone's stock vest. And that way, if somebody has to leave after a year, they don't lose everything, but they still have something for what they did. But also there is more equity available to go bring in someone to replace them. So there are a lot of different options about how you can approach this for your company, but in general it breaks down into a few common situations or scenarios. The first one is 50-50, or a third, a third, a third. And this is obviously the easiest to agree to. It's hard for anyone to say, it's like we're all treating everyone the same. It's hard to say it's not fair. And this is my ideal situation. I really would like to find someone worth making an equal partner. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The hardest part is knowing if they're worth it until after you've worked with them. So unless you've worked with them already, it can be very difficult to judge this. And this is part of where vesting comes in handy to help protect you against maybe making a poor choice or things not working out the way you expected. And even if it's 50-50, you still need to have a CEO and have authority and a clear chain of command. I think that's pretty important. And so I would separate that out. Control and equity are not the same thing. So just because you're 50-50 or 60-40, that doesn't mean necessarily anything about control. And it can be such that you could be, 75-25, but the 25 person might in some way still have control, or it could be equal control and require both to agree for significant changes to be made. It's probably not 20-20-20-20. If you have 5 co-founders, you probably don't split it equally. It's just not very scalable. It's so unlikely that all of the contributions are equal that it's just not going to work out later. It's not going to scale. You're going to move on down the road, and suddenly things aren't going to really work anymore. And some people that are very important and very hard to replace are going to find that they have better things to go do. They have other options than staying there, where they can have a much greater ownership in the company. And in general, what that comes down to is that great leaders and inventors have the most other options, so they get the most of the company. They have the most other things that they could do. 80-20 is kind of a different mindset than the 50-50 of we're all partners. 80-20 is this is my company and I'm hiring everybody, you all work for me. And that's not a bad thing, but it's definitely very different than the other approach. And so 20% would represent a common option pool, a common amount of equity set aside to give to employees, all of them. That could range anywhere from 10 to 30% depending on the company. Key hires in this scenario usually are going to get 3 to 5% of the company. This is generally at the very beginning stages before the company has really raised a significant amount of money, or maybe just around a Series A. And I think most of them are going into that with the expectation that if the company is successful, becomes worth on the order of $100 million, that they're going to receive millions of dollars. There'll be lots of other employees that get hired that end up with 0.5% or 0.25% or even a tenth of a percent. And they're going to have the expectation of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars that might be worth. Obviously, there's a huge range of what could happen, but this is just really just trying to paint a broad brush and put it into some common buckets. So one of the key things as you're hiring somebody here is about opportunity cost. When you really want to think about how much equity you need to give them, one of the core questions about whether they're an employee or a co-founder is, what's their opportunity cost? What else could they go do? And if they could go off and start another company and be the sole founder of it, or find someone else to be a partner and be 50-50 and still be very likely to be successful, then you have to offer them a lot to get them to be part of this company. And if you don't, it's probably not going to last very long. And the best people have the best opportunity costs. The people that you want to work with the most, the people that are going to have the biggest impact, the people that are going to complement you and push you and be additive, have a synergy, are people that also are going to have a lot of other options. And so you want to keep that in mind. There's lots of different situations, but and you don't get to pick. You don't get to say, I'm going to pick someone that's like this. You have to also be opportunistic and look at the people that are available to you, the people that you meet and that you know and that you can find. So I prefer 50-50, but it doesn't mean I can always have it. I prefer 50-50 if I can find someone else to be a partner with me that I believe is as committed to it as me, cares about it as much as me, and can add the same, has the similar experience as me, can add things to it, then that's what I want. But you can't always find that. Another really important thing that will differentiate equity is competitive advantages. If one of the founders brings a significant competitive advantage or experience or industry background, those things are going to be reasons that would shift commonly towards them having more equity. Then the last thing I want to mention is the Entrepreneur's Foundation. At the time that you're thinking about equity, this is the time, and breaking up your company, this is the time, one of the best times to think about the Entrepreneur's Foundation. This is an organization here in Austin that's a nonprofit that was created to help startup companies to donate to charity and support the local community. And they do that through a couple different ways. One, they allow you to now basically assign stock options or stock to the Entrepreneur's Foundation while it's not worth much, which minimizes the taxes that are paid on that. And then at the time that you have some kind of liquidity event where that stock becomes worth a lot of money, that money goes to the Entrepreneur's Foundation, and you get to choose where it goes, who to donate it to. And it basically just sets up a vehicle in place to make it easy and efficient to donate that money. They also run a number of community service projects on a quarterly basis to help startup companies and technology companies to go organize and do great things in the community. And it's something that I know my companies have participated in many times in the past. Often they'll be fixing up schools, doing other kind of environmental and community service projects that just make this a better place, and also serve as a great way to get your company together and also working with other companies in the community, such as Bazaar Voice, Other Inbox, and many others that have participated. So it's really a great organization, and if you think your company is really going to be worth something someday, now's the time to be thinking about how you might work with the Entrepreneur's Foundation. So that's what we got. Hope that was helpful, and now you guys need to go figure out how to divide up the equity in your company. And I look forward to seeing what you put together. So if you have any questions, leave some comments on the video here or send me an email.